In this lesson, we're going to create the shape of the arcade cabinet. Alright, so to get started, let's talk about navigating in the viewport of 3ds Max. So you'll see that we have 4 viewports. We have a top viewport, front, left, and perspective. These viewports allow us to see into our 3D world from these different views. Now most of the time we'll be working in the perspective viewport. You can see that it is active with this yellow outline. If you left click on any other viewport, you'll notice that that yellow outline changes, letting you know which one is active. Let's go ahead and activate the perspective viewport, and then we're going to hold down Alt and W, and that will maximize the viewport, giving us the most viewing area. So now that we're in the perspective viewport, let's talk about navigating inside of the viewport, because we'll want to be able to pan, orbit, and zoom into our view to be able to see all the different angles of our model. So to pan, we'll simply hold down the middle mouse button and drag, and that will allow you to pan. Notice that the camera is moving in a parallel fashion to its viewing direction. Now we can also orbit around an object by holding down Alt and then the middle mouse button, and then go ahead and drag the mouse, and that will allow you to orbit around a specific point in space. Now that we know how to orbit, let's talk about zooming. Zooming can be done a couple of different ways. The easiest and most accessible way is using the mouse wheel by scrolling it forward and backward. That will zoom in and out. Now notice that it gives you this incremental zoom. So it kind of has this popping action. Sometimes that's okay, most of the time. But there are going to be times where we want to get in close to a specific object or something in the scene, and we want to make that zooming action a little bit more smooth. So to do that, we'll simply hold down Alt, Control, and the middle mouse button. Go ahead and drag, and that will allow you to zoom in and out. And notice how smooth that is. Perfect. Now at any time that you happen to lose your scene, let's say that you no longer see your model and you're kind of lost. What you can do is you can hit Z on the keyboard, and that will zoom in on the selected object. Now if you don't have anything selected, it will frame in on the objects or all of the objects in the scene. And that makes it a lot easier to move around. So let's go ahead and start creating the shape of our arcade cabinet. So to do this, I'm going to go to my left view. Here inside of my perspective view, if I hit L on the keyboard, that will switch over to my left view. Let's hold down the middle mouse button and let's pan down. And we're going to bring this origin line across this plane, and we're going to go ahead and bring it pretty close to the bottom here. Now what I want to do is I want to create the shape of the arcade cabinet. Now I could use some primitives like 3D geometry, like a box or a sphere, and shape that out, but I think the easiest way to do that would be to use a spline. Now a spline is a 2D shape inside of 3D space. So if I go to my command panel, which is this entire section here, and then I go to my modify tab, or excuse me, not my modify tab, my create tab, which is right here, and then I go to the shape category, you'll notice that we have this drop down that says splines. Now if you left click on the drop down, you'll see that you get lots of different options here, especially if you go into your primitives, like your geometry here. You'll see that we have lots of different options to go with there. So let's go back to our shapes. Let's stay under splines, and let's grab the line tool. So once we left click on that, you'll notice that it stays activated, okay, or highlighted. Here what we can do is we can left click and create points in 3D space. Now I want to create these points to create the shape of our arcade cabinet. So to do that, let's simply left click, and you'll notice that a vertex gets dropped. Now I want to go ahead and make sure that these vertices are dropped or placed right on my grid points. So to do that, let's simply right click to end that line creation process. If you don't create any more than one vertex and you right click, that's going to get rid of that line altogether. Now if you happen to click a bunch of points and then you hit right click, it will create that line. Go ahead and simply delete it if you've done that. Now you can delete by hitting delete on the keyboard. So let's go ahead and turn on our grid point snapping. To do this, we'll go up to the top of our toolbar, and then we're going to left click on the snaps toggle. Then we're going to right click on it, and this is going to bring up our grid and snap settings. Notice that under your snaps tab, you have standard, and then grid points should be activated by default. If not, go ahead and hit clear all and then activate grid points. That should be the only one active. Now let's go ahead and just close the window, and then we'll come in and we'll create the shape of our cabinet. This will be done fairly easy. Let's go ahead and left click right here at the origin line where the two black lines meet. Let's go out 4, and then we're going to go up 3. Let's go across at a diagonal angle 1, and then we'll go up 1. Let's go back 2, and then we're going to go up, let's go up 3, and then I'm going to go up 1 more, and then we'll go across to the black line and then straight down. Now it's going to ask us to close the spline whenever we click on that first vertex point. Yes, we want to go ahead and close the spline, meaning we want to make it one continuous line all the way around. Let's go ahead and hit yes on that. Now you'll notice that it looks like our line has disappeared, but because we have done this the grid points snap, those lines are perfectly on those grid points. Hit G on the keyboard to see your line again. Perfect. Now there's one thing that I want to do before we end this lesson. Let's go ahead and hit G one more time. Let's right click, and then we're going to go to our Modify tab. Going to the Modify tab with this object selected allows us to see the sub-objects of that object. Now sub-objects can be vertices, they can be segments, or they can be splines. Now you'll notice that that will change based on the type of object that you have selected in the scene, and we'll talk about that here in just a little while. First, let's go ahead and go to vertex mode. Notice that it allows us to select the different vertices in that line that we created. Let's go ahead and take this one right here, and what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and actually, you know what, let's do this. Let's create an extra point right in here, and let's place it right here. So to do that, let's simply go down in our rollouts. Just left click and drag that. Now you can also grab this little black scroll bar, and you can pull that down as well. Go ahead and go to this refine. But before we do that, let's make sure we hit connect. Then let's go ahead and click on refine, and that will activate it. And then what we can do is we can place a vertex anywhere that we want on this line. Let's place it right here. So you should have 3 vertices right in line with one another at one grid space apart. Let's go ahead and right click on that. Then let's select around that vertex that we just created, and let's pull that back in the X one space. So let's hit G, and this is what our arcade cabinet should look like. Perfect. Now I want to go ahead and pull that up one more. So let's go ahead and select these vertices right across the top. Let's pull those up 1. Let's take this one, pull it up 1, and then we'll take this one and pull it up 1. Perfect. Now that's the proportions that I would like. So now that we have outlined our arcade cabinet, let's go ahead and give it 3D geometry. Because if we hit P on our keyboard, we go to our perspective view, you'll notice if I hit G, you'll see my grid. You'll notice that all we have is a 2D line. We're trying to create 3D objects in our scene, not just shapes like this. So to add geometry to it, let's simply go to our modifier list under the Modify tab, and let's add in a modifier. A modifier will modify the object based on what we've selected. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to use a modifier called extrude. Let's go down in our list, and it's in alphabetical order, and you'll see extrude. Notice that it has given us 3D geometry, but it's very flat at this point. Let's go ahead and adjust our amount. Let's set that to 0.1. Hit enter on that, and you'll see that that gives you just a very thin amount on that. Let's actually go to 1 on that. So type in 1 and then enter, and there we go. So now we've got one side of our arcade cabinet. Now what we'll do is we'll talk about duplicating and connecting all of this together in our next lesson. So we'll see you then.